The book of Revelation speaks not merely of future events, but of timeless spiritual principles unfolding across history. These ancient visions, recorded by John, offer profound warnings for humanity's collective journey. As we witness global upheaval increasing in both frequency and intensity, these prophetic symbols illuminate our current reality, calling us to deeper understanding and spiritual awakening. In the ancient visions recorded by John, we see the emergence of a rider on a fiery red horse, a powerful symbol that speaks directly to our modern world. This horseman, given power to take peace from the earth, represents the eternal spiritual warning about humanity's tendency toward conflict and destruction. Look around at our global landscape today. We are witnessing an unprecedented escalation of conflicts across continents, from the tensions in Eastern Europe to the ongoing strife in the Middle East and the growing militarization in Asia. These aren't merely political events. They are spiritual indicators of humanity's collective consciousness manifesting its lower vibrations. The Red Horse of Revelation wasn't just a prediction of future wars. It was a warning about the spiritual condition that precedes all conflict. When peace is removed from the earth, it first departs from human hearts. The growing hostility we observe between nations reflects a deeper spiritual crisis within individuals. What makes today's conflicts particularly significant is their increasing intensity and technological sophistication. Modern warfare has evolved beyond the imagination of ancient prophets, yet the spiritual principle remains unchanged. When humanity abandons divine love and wisdom, the horseman of war rides forth. Remember that Revelation speaks in symbolic language that transcends time. The rider's great sword now takes many forms: nuclear arsenals, cyber weapons, economic sanctions, and information warfare. These tools of modern conflict may look different, but they emerge from the same spiritual void that John witnessed in his vision. Edgar once spoke of these times, noting that soul development would face its greatest challenges during periods of global upheaval. His insights remind us that these external conflicts mirror our internal spiritual battles. The war within precedes the war without. The spiritual warning here isn't simply about predicting disaster, it's a call to transformation. When we see nations rising against nations, we're being urged to examine our own contributions to collective consciousness. Every thought of hatred, every act of division, every moment of choosing fear over love, these energies feed the Red Horseman's power. The intensification of global conflict serves as a spiritual alarm, awakening us to recognize our interconnection. The Red Horse cannot ride where hearts are unified in higher consciousness. This is why the book of Revelation isn't merely prophesying inevitable doom, it's offering us a choice. Those who understand spiritual principles recognize that prophecy isn't fixed destiny, but potential direction. The horseman of war rides only where consciousness allows him passage. By raising our vibration, individually and collectively, we can redirect humanity's path. This warning from Revelation calls us to become peacemakers at the deepest level. True peace isn't merely the absence of conflict, but the presence of justice, compassion, and spiritual alignment. When enough hearts embody these qualities, the Red Horse finds no path. Consider how your own thoughts and actions either feed conflict energy or contribute to peace consciousness. Do you participate in divisive conversations? Do you view others through the lens of separation? Or are you cultivating the spiritual awareness that recognizes our essential unity? The escalation of global tensions we witness today isn't separate from our individual spiritual journey. Each soul's awakening weakens the Red Horseman's power. Each person who chooses love over fear helps rewrite the prophecy. Revelation's warnings weren't given to frighten us, but to awaken us. The Red Horse rides as a messenger, not of inevitable doom, but of urgent spiritual necessity. Its appearance in our world today is both confirmation of ancient wisdom and invitation to higher consciousness. The ancient text of Revelation speaks of a time when the earth itself would respond to humanity's disharmony, a period marked by earthquakes, floods, and fires of increasing magnitude. These aren't random disasters, but spiritual communications encoded in the language of nature. When John wrote of mountains moving and islands disappearing, he was describing precisely what we witness today, a world experiencing climate transformation at an unprecedented rate. The melting polar regions, rising sea levels, and intensifying storm systems aren't merely physical phenomena. They represent the Earth's spiritual response to collective human consciousness. Consider the acceleration of natural disasters we've documented in recent decades. Meteorological records confirm what many already sense. Something fundamental has shifted in our relationship with the natural world. Hurricane systems grow stronger and more unpredictable each season. Regions once protected from extreme weather now face devastating storms. Areas previously immune to wildfires now burn with increasing regularity. The spiritual warning embedded in these events transcends simplistic interpretations. Revelation doesn't describe these occurrences to predict punishment, but rather to illustrate natural law, the principle that physical reality ultimately reflects spiritual conditions. When humanity exists in disharmony with divine principles, that dissonance manifests as environmental instability. Earthquakes, described vividly in Revelation as shaking the very foundations of human civilization, have indeed increased in both frequency and impact. Major seismic events now regularly affect densely populated regions, sometimes triggering secondary disasters like tsunamis that sweep away coastal communities. These aren't random geological occurrences, but vibrational responses to humanity's collective energetic state. The fires mentioned in Revelation, both literal and symbolic, find their modern expression in the unprecedented wildfires consuming forests across continents. Australia, California, the Amazon, and Siberia have all experienced record-breaking fire seasons, transforming millions of acres into ash. These flames represent both physical consequence and spiritual message, the earth purifying itself through transformation. Floods, too, feature prominently in Revelation's symbolism. Today's increasing rainfall extremes, where regions experience either devastating deluges or prolonged drought, mirror the biblical warning of waters that either overwhelm or disappear entirely. When atmospheric patterns shift so dramatically that thousand-year flood events occur regularly, we're witnessing more than meteorological anomalies. We're receiving spiritual communication. What makes these events particularly significant is their accelerating pattern. It's not merely that disasters occur, they've always been part of Earth's cycles, but rather their increasing intensity and clustering. Multiple catastrophic events now unfold simultaneously across different regions, stretching humanity's response capacity beyond its limits. The spiritual principle underlying these phenomena relates to balance and harmony. Just as the human body manifests illness when its systems fall out of alignment, the Earth generates extreme conditions when the consciousness inhabiting it becomes imbalanced. Our planet functions as a living system, not merely in biological terms, but in energetic and spiritual dimensions as well. Those with deeper understanding recognize that these natural upheavals serve as catalysts for spiritual awakening. When established structures, both physical and societal, become unstable, humans are forced to reconsider fundamental assumptions. Disaster often precedes transformation, clearing away what no longer serves humanity's evolution. The Book of Revelation describes these events not to instill fear, but to inspire preparation, not just material readiness, but spiritual alignment. Those who interpret these warnings wisely understand that external catastrophe often triggers internal awakening. When familiar security dissolves, the soul's priorities clarify. Volcanic activity, another phenomenon described in Revelation, has likewise intensified in recent years. Major eruptions now occur with greater frequency, sending ash clouds that disrupt global transportation systems and affect weather patterns. These powerful expressions of Earth's internal forces symbolize the emergence of long-suppressed energies, both geologically and spiritually. The spiritual teaching offered through these natural events invites us to restore harmony with Earth's living systems. By recognizing our planet as a conscious entity rather than an inert resource, we begin healing the relationship that generates catastrophic imbalance. Each disaster contains wisdom for those willing to perceive beyond physical damage. What Revelation ultimately reveals through these warnings is the inseparable connection between human consciousness and earthly conditions. As we evolve spiritually, recognizing our oneness with all creation, The extreme manifestations of environmental discord will naturally diminish. The Earth responds to humanity's vibration. When that frequency rises toward love and harmony, nature reflects that higher order. These accelerating natural phenomena confirm what spiritual teachers have always known. We don't merely inhabit the Earth, we co-create its conditions through our collective consciousness. The increasing intensity of earthquakes, floods, and fires serves as both confirmation of ancient prophecy and invitation to higher awareness. The pale horseman of Revelation rides forth with power over a fourth of the earth, bringing death through pestilence and disease. This symbolic figure, whose color suggests illness and decay, speaks directly to our contemporary experience with global health crises and emerging pathogens that challenge humanity's sense of security and control. In recent years, we have witnessed the emergence of diseases that spread with unprecedented speed across continents, transforming from localized outbreaks into global pandemics within weeks. These health emergencies reflect precisely what John described in his vision: illnesses that transcend borders, affecting vast populations regardless of wealth or status. The spiritual significance of these events extends far beyond their physical impact. What makes modern epidemics particularly relevant to Revelation's warnings is their mysterious origins and evolutionary nature. New viruses emerge from previously unexplored ecological zones, while familiar pathogens mutate into forms that resist our medical interventions. This pattern of disease evolution mirrors the spiritual principle that when humanity operates in disharmony with natural law, unexpected challenges arise to redirect our attention. Consider how recent pandemics have fundamentally altered human behavior and social structures. Seemingly overnight, entire societies transformed their daily patterns, adopting new forms of interaction and questioning long-established priorities. Such rapid collective shifts reveal the spiritual purpose behind these health challenges. They serve as catalysts for consciousness transformation on a global scale. The acceleration of antibiotic resistance represents another dimension of this prophecy. Medicines that once easily controlled bacterial infections now fail with increasing frequency. This phenomenon, where healing tools lose their effectiveness, correlates with the spiritual warning about humanity's over-reliance on material solutions, while neglecting the energetic foundations of health and balance. Chronic diseases, too, have reached epidemic proportions across developed nations. Conditions like heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and autoimmune disorders affect populations at ever younger ages, suggesting a fundamental imbalance in humanity's relationship with its environment and inner nature. These persistent illnesses often resist purely physical treatments, pointing toward their deeper spiritual dimensions. Mental health challenges have likewise intensified globally, with anxiety, depression, and related conditions affecting unprecedented numbers of people. This epidemic of psychological suffering corresponds to Revelation's warning about afflictions that impact not just the body, but the spirit. When collective consciousness becomes fragmented and disconnected from its spiritual source, mental distress naturally follows. The pale horseman's appearance in our time manifests not only through physical disease, but through the spread of addiction in its many forms. Substance dependencies, technological obsessions, and compulsive behaviors represent spiritual malaise expressing through physical symptoms. These patterns of disconnection from authentic well-being directly reflect the conditions described in prophetic visions. Particularly significant is the way modern epidemics reveal systemic inequalities. Health crises disproportionately impact vulnerable populations, exposing the spiritual sickness of societies that fail to recognize human interconnection. When some communities suffer while others remain protected, we witness the spiritual principle that no part of humanity can achieve lasting health while others remain in suffering. Revelation's warnings about disease serve not as predictions of inevitable doom, but as urgent invitations to spiritual awakening. Each health crisis contains wisdom for those with eyes to see beyond physical symptoms to root causes. The increasing frequency of these challenges speaks to the accelerating timeframe of humanity's spiritual development. Those who understand spiritual principles recognize that epidemics reflect collective consciousness manifesting in physical form. When humanity harbors thoughts of separation, fear, and materialism. These energetic patterns naturally express as physical imbalance. Healing, therefore, must address both symptoms and the consciousness that generates them. The prophetic visions of disease aren't meant to frighten, but to illuminate our path forward. By understanding the spiritual dimensions of health challenges, we recognize that true healing involves restoring harmony at all levels: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. Epidemics serve as powerful teachers, revealing where humanity has departed from natural law. What makes today's health challenges particularly aligned with Revelation's warnings is their global scale and simultaneous emergence. When multiple disease threats converge, from novel viruses to resistant bacteria to chronic lifestyle conditions, we're witnessing precisely the convergence of forces described in ancient prophecy. The spiritual teaching embedded in these health warnings points toward humanity's need for holistic transformation. True immunity arises not merely from medical interventions, but from living in alignment with divine principles. When individuals cultivate inner harmony and societies establish just, compassionate systems, the conditions that generate epidemic disease naturally diminish. Every health crisis contains both challenge and opportunity. While the physical suffering associated with disease should never be minimized, the spiritual awakening catalyzed by such experiences offers profound potential for evolutionary growth. Societies that respond to health emergencies by increasing compassion, cooperation, and awareness demonstrate the highest understanding of prophecy's purpose. The Pale Horseman rides not to destroy but to awaken, to shake humanity from complacency and redirect attention toward the spiritual foundations of true health. By recognizing the deeper message within modern epidemics, we transform prophetic warning into evolutionary opportunity, contributing to collective healing rather than amplifying fear. The black horse of Revelation carries a rider holding scales, proclaiming measures of wheat and barley for a day's wages, a powerful symbol of economic imbalance that speaks directly to our current global financial reality. This vision wasn't merely predicting ancient famine, but illuminating a spiritual principle about how humanity's relationship with material resources reflects its consciousness evolution. Today, we witness unprecedented economic polarization across societies. The concentration of wealth has reached extremes that ancient prophets could scarcely have imagined, yet the spiritual dynamic they described remains unchanged. When material resources become divorced from spiritual values, systems of exchange inevitably generate suffering and instability. Consider the acceleration of financial volatility we've experienced in recent decades. Global markets swing dramatically based on factors increasingly disconnected from actual human needs or productive capacity. Currencies rise and fall, often devastating entire populations overnight. These fluctuations aren't merely economic phenomena, but spiritual indicators of a system operating without grounding in deeper principles. What makes current economic conditions particularly significant is their global interconnection. No longer do financial crises remain contained within national borders. They ripple across continents, affecting even those who never participated in the original imbalanced exchanges. This worldwide economic web mirrors exactly what Revelation foresaw: systems of trade and currency that would eventually encompass all humanity. The increasing separation between productive work and financial reward represents another dimension of this prophecy. When speculation and algorithm-driven trading generate more wealth than actual creation of goods and services, we're witnessing precisely the imbalance symbolized by the black horse's scales. True value becomes obscured by systems that reward manipulation rather than contribution. Inflation, the steady erosion of purchasing power affecting ordinary people, manifests the very condition described in John's vision, where a day's wages barely covers basic necessities. In many regions, housing, education, healthcare, and food consume increasing proportions of income, forcing impossible choices between essential needs. This growing precarity reflects the spiritual warning about systems that disconnect resource distribution from human dignity. The debt mechanisms that now dominate global economics further illustrate Revelation's warnings. Nations, corporations, and individuals operate under unprecedented debt burdens, creating modern forms of bondage where freedom becomes progressively constrained by financial obligations. These invisible chains represent precisely the spiritual dynamic the prophecies described. Material systems that gradually restrict human potential. Particularly revealing is how financial instability generates fear-based consciousness across entire populations. When economic security becomes increasingly unattainable, people naturally contract into survival mentality, diminishing their capacity for compassion, creativity, and spiritual awareness. This psychological impact of economic uncertainty serves the exact opposite of humanity's spiritual purpose. The Black Horseman's appearance in our time manifests through growing food insecurity, despite global abundance. When agricultural systems prioritize profit over nourishment, the result mirrors Revelation's warning. Some consume in excess while others lack necessities. This paradox of simultaneous surplus and scarcity reveals the spiritual dysfunction underlying material distribution systems. Digital currencies and cashless societies represent another fulfillment of prophetic vision, a transformation of exchange mechanisms into increasingly abstract and centralized forms. While technology itself is neutral, these developments carry profound spiritual implications about humanity's relationship with material resources and the potential for both liberation and control. Those with spiritual understanding recognize that economic systems ultimately reflect collective consciousness. When a society values competition over cooperation, accumulation over circulation, and short-term gain over sustainable well-being, its financial structures naturally generate the imbalances we now witness globally. The crisis isn't merely in the systems, but in the awareness that creates them. What makes our current economic moment particularly aligned with Revelation's warnings is the convergence of multiple financial stresses: inflation, debt, inequality, resource depletion, and technological disruption occurring simultaneously. This perfect economic storm creates precisely the conditions described in prophetic literature, where material security becomes increasingly elusive for many. The spiritual teaching embedded in these economic warnings points toward humanity's need to realign exchange systems with deeper values. True prosperity arises not from endless growth, but from balanced circulation of resources in ways that honor all life. When economic structures reflect principles of reciprocity, sufficiency, and regeneration, they naturally produce widespread well-being rather than concentrated excess. Every financial crisis contains both warning and invitation. While material suffering should never be dismissed as merely spiritual teaching, these systemic failures offer profound opportunities to reimagine how human societies organize resource distribution. Communities that respond to economic challenges by increasing cooperation, simplicity, and mutual support demonstrate the highest understanding of prophecy's purpose. The Black Horseman rides not to condemn, but to redirect, to guide humanity toward economic systems that reflect our spiritual nature rather than suppress it. By recognizing the deeper message within financial instability, we transform prophetic warning into evolutionary possibility, contributing to collective abundance rather than perpetuating scarcity consciousness. What Revelation ultimately reveals through this warning is that economic systems cannot be separated from spiritual values. When material exchange operates without foundations in justice, compassion, and recognition of our essential interconnection, collapse becomes inevitable. The increasing frequency and intensity of financial crises serve as both confirmation of ancient wisdom and invitation to create new possibilities. The spiritual principle underlying all economic prophecy is that outer conditions reflect inner reality. As humanity evolves in consciousness, recognizing that true wealth lies in relationships, creativity, wisdom, and connection to Source, our material systems will naturally transform to reflect these higher values. The crises we face aren't punishment, but purification, clearing away what no longer serves our collective evolution. In these times of economic uncertainty, those who understand spiritual principles recognize an unprecedented opportunity to participate in creating systems aligned with divine order. By cultivating inner abundance regardless of external conditions, and by engaging in economic activities that generate genuine value for all life, we become active participants in fulfilling prophecy's highest purpose, not collapse, but transformation. If these spiritual insights have resonated with your soul, please subscribe to receive more teachings that illuminate ancient wisdom for modern times. Share your personal awakening journey in the comments below. Your experience may be the very light someone else needs on their path. Together, we can build a community of conscious seekers navigating these prophetic times.